Hi, friends, and welcome to the Dreamer and Doer podcast. I'm your host, Bree Johnson. I designed this space to be a place that we can discuss dreaming big despite the setbacks and fears that come with it. I invite you to come along this journey with me as we embrace our stories and share our journeys. So let's dream big together and get intentional about making it happen. Hey there, and welcome back to the Dreamer and Doer podcast. I'm your host, Bree Johnson, and I'm so excited to be chatting with you today. We've had some great guests on the show, and I'm so thankful for all of you who have been tuning in and listening with each episode, and especially for those of you who have left a review. We are so thankful for those. I know it seems like something really little, but it really does help us a lot. So if you've left a review, I just wanted to let you know that we are so thankful for you. And if you haven't, maybe you should pause this episode, leave us a review real quick, and hop back on over and listen to today's episode. So today I'm going to be chatting with myself. I wanted to hop on here every once in a while and just record a little episode of things that I've been learning and kind of figuring out practical ways. Part of my heart and vision for this podcast is that I would provide you with ways that you would be able to see my journey as it is happening. And, I think sometimes we listen to these podcasts with people who have made it, or at least it seems like they have. So I feel like we can start that ugly game of comparison, or we just shut down. Like we are kind of like, well, that's never going to happen to me. There's no way I can do that. Why even try? So I'm going to probably be touching on a couple different things as we go through this episode. And I think the first thing I want to touch on is something that I call analysis paralysis. Analysis paralysis is what happens when you feel so overwhelmed by the tasks ahead that you just shut down and do nothing. And I don't know about you, but I've had this happen to me multiple times. I feel like I start overthinking things and planning out and thinking ahead, and then all of a sudden it feels like there is just a mountain in front of me. And it gets to the point where I wonder if it's even possible to move the mountain or climb the mountain. So at that point is when I start to shut down and kind of think, well, there's just no way I can do this. I should probably just throw in the towel and give up. And maybe you've been there too. And I wanted to touch on some things that I do to help me get out of that analysis paralysis moment. I know in the beginning when I started my business, it really felt that way. Just because I had this idea and I didn't know how to start a business. I didn't know, how do I set up my business? Do I file as an S Corp? Do I file as an LLC, an incorporation? All these questions that had to be answered and the paperwork that has to happen, to be an official business. So all those things just felt really daunting. And not just that, I still get analysis paralysis often. I'm just kind of thinking back to the beginning. And then all the other tasks of setting up a website, a logo, a name, really simple things, but they feel really big and overwhelming. And I just remember trying to figure out how to get out of that, just the weight of all those things and how I could make the burden lighter. And so something that I got into, which you've heard me talk about before, is Trello. So really Trello and brainstorming. So once I would get all these ideas and things in my brain, I would just write them out. And there was no rhyme or reason to them. I just scribbled on paper. And then that's when I started finding out kind of connecting the dots. So which needed to come first and making this timeline. Another great tool that I really enjoyed was Power Sheets by Laura Casey. I feel like it just laid it out in this super easy step-by-step process that really made you think and write down all the craziness going in your head. And one of the things I've learned is that I have to give myself a deadline or it doesn't happen. And so if there's something I want to happen, it can't just be like, oh, well, maybe around these dates it'll be done, because next thing I know, that date has come and gone and I have done nothing. And so it's been really crucial for me to pick a date and stick to that date. For instance, saying I'm going to have fall ordered by August 11th. And then I know that these next couple weeks that I have to spend time planning my orders and my purchases so that I can have a successful business. We obviously need inventory. Those are two tools that I use to combat that feeling of analysis paralysis. And I know it's heavy and it's deep. And honestly, I get that way too. And it's not just in the tasks and what I have to do or like what's on the to-do list. That's definitely a huge part of what keeps me from moving forward. But I think another huge part of that is the game of comparison. And why I say that is because I feel like I can scroll through my Instagram or my Facebook and see these like other successful businesses or people, these girls that look a certain way and they're doing these really cool things or that sort of thing. And it becomes a little bit overwhelming because you start to pick apart your flaws and you're like, well, maybe if I just looked like this, or if I could just lose 15 pounds. And then obviously raw, transparent moment. Didn't think I was going to go here, but it's easy to start picking apart the things that you see wrong in yourself. And for me, that causes me to shut down. So I will just want to sleep or figure out ways to numb out. And I think in order to continue moving forward and experiencing growth, that one, you can't numb out. And two, you have to stop comparing. We're each in our own lane, doing our own thing. And I think we're all doing amazing things to the best of our ability. And I think it's even better when we can just cheer each other on. And so there's people that I follow and I like, but sometimes I have to unfollow people when I start feeling discouraged or feeling the need to be like them. And that's okay if you have to do that. You know, sometimes you just have to protect those feelings so that you can remain healthy. I think that's the hard part about social media, which we've talked about all the time. But honestly, I think everyone's probably compared themselves to someone on Instagram at least one time. And if you haven't, then teach me your ways, because I want to know how you have been able to guard your heart and your mind. And I know sometimes you just have to sign off because it's hard to tune out all those voices. But just know that you're enough and you're doing amazing things too. And I guarantee you there's someone else out there looking up to you. And I think that's probably the most encouraging thing to me, is to know that if there's just one person out there that catches my vision, catches my message, who feels encouraged or inspired by me, then I feel completely satisfied and encouraged. I want to know that the things I'm producing are uplifting to people and encouraging them and not causing them to play the comparison game or that sort of thing. So I just want to keep an element of realness, because I know the struggle of seeing people who have it figured out and seem like they have these awesome lives. And yes, like my Instagram is definitely a highlight reel. And so I know I'm not the only person that keeps it that way. So keep that in mind too. It is someone's highlight reel, and I know you know these things, but it's kind of one of those topics that you just have to constantly be reminded of, because it's easy to forget. Like, it's easier said than done to not compare. So was not expecting to go there. But another thought that came to mind was, I never saw myself starting a fashion boutique. I never considered myself someone who is fashionable. People would compliment me on my clothes or say, you dress so cute, but I've always been kind of against the trend, dressed in what I liked. I even remember like in middle school, late elementary school, when everyone was buying Abercrombie and Fitch and Hollister and all these brands. One, my mom wouldn't buy it for me, but two, just wanted to go against the grain. I wanted to find things that were me, and I don't even know where we shopped, but I found things that I loved. And I was actually looking back at some throwback pictures of myself And I loved being able to see that I never dressed like anyone else, really, and just kind of have my own style and flair to things. And yes, some were embarrassing, but I know that even as I was younger, I stayed true to myself. And so now being in this world of fashion and online clothing, it's been really interesting for me because I feel like I don't fit the mold of someone who would normally run an online boutique. You know, I see these people opening these boutiques and they're skinny and they're tall and they have long flowy hair and they're just gorgeous. And those feelings of comparison sneak up real quickly for me that cause me to shut down and go into that analysis paralysis comparison hole. And so I've slowly been learning ways to get out of that. And so more practically speaking, when those types of things happen, more on the comparison side, not necessarily the analysis paralysis for business, but for personal life, I just tried to do something to get me out of that funk. So whether that's using essential oils to clear my mind, taking a nap, sometimes I need to take a nap to process these things and get out of that bad mood. A lot of times really though, moving my body or just going outside and working out and kind of having this like hash it out moment is probably what gets me out of it the most. I love listening to the Revelation Wellness podcast. It's always encouraging to me, or any other podcast really. I like just moving my body. I think when I'm moving my body, the most ideas come to me, like my head is most cleared. So I encourage you to find a space where you can clear your head easily and figure out how you can pick yourself up out of those comparison holes or the analysis paralysis trap. There is ways to get out of it. So you need to figure out what works for you to figure out how you can take the next step forward. So I know that having that analysis paralysis in the beginning of your business and even beyond is something really difficult to deal with. But finding those things that help you get out of it, I think, are going to be crucial to your success. The next thing I want to address in moving forward with your dreams is fear. I actually asked my Instagram followers, what is the one thing holding you back from your dreams? And people answered and responded with several different answers, but I would say the majority of them were fear in some sort. So that fear ranged from fear of rejection, fear of failure, fear of what other people might think of you, fear of being misunderstood. All of it came down to that root of fear. And fear is one of those things that is so tricky. It's inevitable. I think we're always going to feel some type of fear just because that's how our bodies are made to work. But I think a lot of times that fear is what's holding us back. And I will say fear was one of those things that held us back for a really long time. And I don't think there was necessarily all of a sudden the fear was just over with. I think there's still fear every day. But the most important thing is to know that fear and realize that fear and then speak truths over it and know that that fear is coming from a place of lies. I was thinking about mainly the fear of rejection or fear of what other people are going to think of you. And I understand it's such a real fear. Like it is such a real thing we deal with, worried about what people are going to think about us. It's something I deal with every day. And I can't say that like I'm cured of it, but I really did just get to a point of I'm just going to post it. This is me. Someone will like it. I need to tell my voice. I don't want to be anyone else, right? So I'd rather be rejected, I think, for myself than be accepted for someone I'm not. And so as I was thinking of this fear of rejection and what people think of you, I realized like how ridiculous and pointless is it that we would let imaginary opinions of someone else hold us back. We have no idea how people are going to respond to us. We don't know what their opinions are going to be, but honestly, those types of opinions, they are not on you. It doesn't speak to who you are as a person. A lot of times, I think those negative opinions, they come from someone else's insecurity or their jealousy. It comes from their heart issues. I think a lot of times, though, that we let those fears and thoughts of what someone could think really hold us back. I think there's been even times where I'll give an example. I was at a show last weekend and this one girl came to a show and I was really nervous because I knew she kind of had some hesitations about the prices of our things, and that pricing is always one of those things that makes me nervous and kind of strikes up that like, oh, I know, but like it has to be this price for a reason because of being ethically made or made in the USA. And so when I met her, I kind of had this wall up of like, what do I say? How I don't know. I was scared of being rejected. And then I was like, you know what? No, this is pointless. She's going to buy something if she wants to. She's not going to buy anything. But if she doesn't buy anything, that's not necessarily anything I did wrong. It just happens that way sometimes, right? Well, she ended up trying on some clothes and really liked a lot of the pieces she tried on. She bought something, and then eventually she decided that she was going to buy more, and she left us a review on Facebook. And so the situation where I had already had it in my mind that someone had rejected me actually turned out to be the complete opposite. And I feel like I could have very easily shut off more, but because I chose to continue to put myself out there, that we ended up connecting in a way that was worth it to not only my business, but in a relational way. Because then I found out she had this really amazing blog, and I was like, I am a huge fan. I love the things you've written about. So if you're that person listening, thank you. Maybe you know who you are, maybe you don't. But as I was just thinking of these fears, I think the fear of rejection and fear of what people think of you is one that just made me sad that we have to worry so much about that, when really what people think of us, that's really on them. It's not on you. Now, I feel like I shouldn't have to put a disclaimer here, but maybe I have to. Obviously, presenting yourself in a kind way, respectful, being kind. My son and I were listening to a podcast together this morning for kids, and it was talking about the fruits of the Spirit. And at the end of the podcast, it asked the kids, what do you want to be when you grow up? And it lists all these things, doctor, this and that. And then it asks you, who do you want to be when you grow up? And it was addressing back to the fruits of the Spirit, like you want to be kind, you want to be a person who is loving, a person who is joyful. So being what you are doesn't matter. It's who you are that matters. And I really like that simple analogy, and even hearing my son say, well, when I grow up, I want to be a Batman that is kind. And I was like, yes, you can be Batman, and Batman will be kind. But even that he can kind of recognize that. So obviously, if you're being kind and respectful, basically fruits of the Spirit, love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control, and people still take issue with who you are. Obviously, there's differences between good character and bad character, so I'm more addressing good character. I don't feel like, you should be going on rants and cussing people out and don't care what they think. Like, that's not what I'm addressing. I'm addressing, like, putting your heart out there and being vulnerable and transparent. And when you are that person to people, that's when that connection, that human connection happens. And I feel like we shouldn't be afraid of that, because it's always worth it. I've never had an instance where I've regretted being open and honest with someone. I've always regretted holding something back. No matter what, there's still going to be one person that is going to connect with you and cheer you on. And I think specifically speaking to women, if we were more supportive of each other, I love the quote that says, you can tell who the strongest woman in the room is because she's complimenting someone else's beauty or their strength, that sort of thing. They don't feel intimidated or jealous. And it's a really hard thing to have when we've been in this world of just comparison. But I challenge you to be transparent and open with your people. So that was 2, the fear. So I talked about fear of rejection, but also fear of failure. And I think failure is subjective. I think that's the word I'm looking for. Like, I've had to learn and retrain myself to know that, yes, there's going to be failures, but to stop looking at them as failures, but to start looking at them as obstacles. And so I think a lot of times we give up too soon. We think we failed, but really it was just an obstacle, because things get hard and they get messy, and it's easy to throw in the towel when they do, right? So I've had to retrain myself to say, like, no, this one thing may be hard and maybe this obstacle that I think is never going to happen, and it starts to feel hopeless. But then I have to remind myself that there's so much more good to do if I keep going. So I think once we think of this fear of failure, that we have to define what success is. So what is it that looks successful? More on like your day-to-day aspect, and not looking things so close with like a magnifying glass, but looking at them from a distance and from a view of like, okay, let me look back. Instead of saying like the day was a failure, instead of looking at the day, start looking at the week. Instead of looking at the week, look at the month. And I think when we kind of shift our focus into that, it makes it not feel so overwhelming, and we definitely see our successes. So we have to celebrate the little victories in between the hard things, I think that's will help us continue to remain inspired and motivated to keep working towards what our goals are. So basically, basically fear is a jerk and a liar, and you have far too much good to do to let fear hold you back. And when I'm talking about dreaming and these different things, I'm not necessarily talking about running a business or some giant nonprofit or being the most popular person on Instagram. Not those big things. They can be little things too, like small dreams. Like I have a dream of getting healthy. And yeah, I do. I have a dream of getting healthy again and taking care of myself like I did before kids. And it seems like maybe a small, silly dream to some people, but it's something that I really do value. And I've honestly let fear hold me back in that. And I don't even know why I've let fear hold me back, because getting my health back is not something to take lightly. And I think it's the fear of it never happening that holds me back. And so I just have to remind myself every day to keep taking those little steps towards getting my health back. And if I miss a workout, give myself grace, but don't let it be an excuse to not do it the next day. And so really just finding that balance of grace and discipline. I think discipline's a healthy thing. And I think that encompasses pursuing our dreams, is having that healthy balance of grace and discipline. And so, you know what? I'm going to end the podcast right here, and we will talk about having a healthy balance of grace and discipline next time. It's definitely something that's been on my heart lately. Thank you guys so much for joining in with me and listening to this podcast. I feel like it was a little bit all over the place. I've been sick, and so my brain's been a little bit spacey, but I'm on the up end and healing and getting better. But my heart's just been burdened by how many people I've talked to that are crippled by fear. And I believe, obviously, it's cheesy. Faith is greater than fear. Love is greater than fear. These things can combat that fear, and we can definitely move forward into pursuing bigger things than ourselves. And when we step out into those great unknowns to pursue bigger things than ourselves, that we will see really amazing things happen. Does that mean they're going to be easy and fun all the time? No, it's going to be hard and messy, and there's going to be trials and struggles, but those things are a part of the journey, and that's what helps us grow and bloom. So thank you guys so much for joining in today. Make sure that you subscribe if you haven't already, and that you leave us a review. Thank you guys so much for listening, and we'll catch you next time.